Good afternoon, everybody. It is Thursday, the 3rd of July. It is 12:30 here in South Africa, which means it is time for Live at the Waterhole. If you are joining us for the very first time, a very warm welcome and a warm welcome to those of you who are regular viewers as well. My name is Ben Coley, and I will be with you live and interactive for the next 2 hours, and we will visit a whole variety of cameras in Kenya, which is where we've started at Oldonyo Lodge. The camera brought to you by Africa. We've got cameras in Zimbabwe, in Botswana, in Namibia, and various ones here in South Africa. And with the help of Tulu in my ear and our wonderful Zoomies, we will be watching what happens and keep you up to speed with any exciting things that are happening. But as always, please do send in questions, comments, so that we can get some discussions going, and I will attempt to interpret what is going on best I can. But lovely to see a nice big dazzle of zebra coming down for a drink, and a rather accommodating elephant bull at the moment who seems unperturbed by this stripy interference to his midday drink. Although he is giving them a little bit of an eye, deciding whether or not he is happy to share this water source, but I think he is resigned to the fact that there are plenty of zebras and it's a good time to share. We have seen a lot of elephants at Oldonyo recently. I'm not quite sure what the water situation is in these Chulu Hills, which is where Oldonyo is based, but there is no perennial water sources there, so I'm guessing that there aren't that many artificial water sources like this, so it does tend to attract an awful lot of game, and we've had in excess of 10, 12, 15 elephant bulls all quenching their thirst. Is that a tail of a monkey or something in the bottom left-hand corner of the screen? Something moving around. But we've had a lot of elephant activity. We've seen one ton a few times. We've seen a little bit of argy-bargy between some of the bulls as well. And lots of different wildlife coming down for a drink. It's always fun to watch these zebras, say not known for their particularly sociable antics, and they do tend to kick, bite, and scratch, and have little arguments with one another when in close proximity, particularly in a situation like this where we will have multiple harems that are all just coming together to take advantage of the resource. So generally speaking, you'll have a stallion and he will have 5, 6, 7 mares, depending on his success, of course. So in a situation like this, where there must be at least 20 zebras here, it was a monkey. At least 20 or so zebras here, we will likely have multiple stallions, and they can get a little bit protective over their mares, certainly. Oh, lovely to see a monkey in the foreground as well, and I'm waiting for this elephant to lose his temper with all of this disturbance in his water. But say, being relatively placid at the moment. We've had a few messages coming through. Fuzzy Dunlop saying, Happy Thirsty Thursday. Absolutely. The elephants and zebras agree with you, certainly. And Penelope Kenyon is looking forward to some great sightings as well. But this is not a bad way to start. 3 species in shot. And I've no doubt we'll see some giraffe here at Oldonyo at some point. If we're lucky, we might get some Visa oryx and some ilams, and maybe, who knows, maybe one or two other exciting things as well. Mr. HUAE87, you say that one ton was seen earlier this morning. Well, if we're lucky, maybe he will pop back and grace us with his fairly overwhelming presence. He is a magnificent bull. But I'm amazed at the tolerance level of this elephant bull, with all these zebras particularly splashing around in the water. But I guess he's got his trunk clamped over that inflow pipe and is getting some nice fresh water. Maybe not too concerned that they're stirring up a lot of silt in the other areas. It'd be nice to see the zebras wading into the water as well, but no danger of crocs in a little pan like this. So I think the zebras know that, so they are quite happy to wander in, and it's probably a good chance to cool off their legs as well, give their hooves a little bit of a clean. Right, apologies for that. Looks like our camera froze at Old Donyo, but that's not a problem. We have headed back all the way down to Maputo so the eastern side of South Africa, northern KwaZulu-Natal, close to the Zimbabwe, close to the Mozambican border, to Tembe Elephant Park, where we have, living up to its main namesake, some more elephants. And what looks to be a little woolly-necked stork on the bottom right-hand side as well. Right, well, it seems Tembe Elephant Park is also not playing ball. It's unfortunate. So we have come to, where is this? This looks like one of the cameras in Matikwe, but I'm not seeing exactly which one it is. But I don't see any activity at the moment. That being said, if we watch long and hard enough, I'm sure there is plenty to be seen here. We are indeed in Madikwe. This is Jamala's camera in the southeastern part of Madikwe. I've never actually been to this dam. I've been to Madikwe a few times, but never actually been past this dam. I know exactly where Jamala is when I was up there doing when we were doing some live drives from Madikwe based just up the road from here. But I do remember some great sightings here on the cameras. I've seen lots and lots of elephants around this dam over the years, but it seems today things are rather quiet. But nice to be able to see the different vegetation types in the different areas of the country and see how everything is responding. We are, of course, in midwinter here. Very little green grass to be seen, everything dying off, but it does give us excellent visibility in the bush. And it does mean that the animals are under more severe water stress, so chances of them coming down for a drink is great. It's an interesting landscape, Madikwe, having been up there. There's a lot of sort of what I would call scrubby bush there. Very few large trees. You've got the shepherd's trees, the Boscia alba trunca, generally the only things that get higher than a few meters. I see one largest tree just right of center in the background, just in front of the mountains there. I would imagine that that is probably a shepherd's tree. So if you're looking for leopards, if they have to hoist their kill to get it away from marauding jackals and brown hyenas, then they're pretty much resigned to these shepherd trees. In the majority of the reserve, there will be some others. Oop, we've got a flyby from the Egyptian goose. I'm sure we will move on to some cameras with a bit more activity. We're just trying to fix the little gremlins that seem to have ensconced themselves in the system at the moment. So apologies for that. I'm sure it won't be long. But I haven't been up to Madikwe for a while. Almost a bit of a crash landing for those two Egyptian geese. Possibly misjudged the approach slightly. But it's quite normal to see ducks and geese flying very, very low to the water, even if they're not coming into land. It's just a good way to generate a little bit of extra lift, save some of the strength of those pectoral muscles. Saw some ground hornbills on the cameras the other day, and it always amazes me that they're able to generate a sufficient amount of lift. Of course, not as heavy as something like the cory bustard, which is the heaviest flying bird, but still pretty amazing. Okay, we're going to try our hand at Jackie's Sarby house and see if there's anything happening at the waterhole there. Well, I see a little bit of avian movement, but rather difficult to identify anything at the moment. It seems it's relatively quiet here at Jackie's in the Sarby Sands, the Northern Sarby Sand Nature Reserve. Again, not a dam that I've been to. I know the Northern Sands relatively well, but never actually been onto Jackie's property. I think I'm actually going there soon. I can't think of the reason why, but I'm pretty sure I do have. Oh, yes, I'm going to do some astronomy training at one of the lodges in the Northern Sands. I'll have to check my calendar, and probably should check my calendar if it's later this month or early next month. But always a treat to get into the sands. I've not been in the Northern Sands for Wild Earth for quite some time now, so I'm kind of hoping that when I do drive in, I should be taking it very slowly in the hope to find.
My name is Amy, and today we're going to be doing things a little bit differently.
Would you like to know what an elephant's favorite food is? You could ask me questions like that in real time. Our safaris are live and interactive from the heart of Africa. The Fortunas over here. Watch Safari Live and connect with nature.
Step into the heart of Africa from the comfort of your home.
Female leopard tracks over here.
Join our expert guides for a live 3-hour safari where every moment is real, unscripted, and unforgettable. Ask questions.
Animals rely on their senses.
Share your thoughts and be part of the experience as we explore together. Safari Live.
Out here, every wild moment matters, and as a Wild Earth explorer, you won't miss a thing. Watch the Wild Earth channel, ad-free 24/7, where you can even rewind and watch something again. Get access to behind-the-scenes videos, fireside chats, and access to early travel offers. It is the best way to stay connected and be part of the Wild Earth family.
Happen here in Africa around the hottest part of the day, we very, very rarely see cats on these cameras during the show here because it's nighttime for the cats. Most of them are sleeping off the heat of the day in the shade or in the thick vegetation. I think in all the times that I have done live at the Waterhole shows, I think I've only ever seen lions once. I think that was at Cat-Eyed Pan, but that was a very, very brief visual because the elephants around the pan did not approve of their presence and chased them off into the thick stuff, and we never saw them again. I think it was two lionesses that I saw there. We had a leopard probably about 2 weeks ago at, I think it was Rosie's Pan, and I have seen one on one of the Kapama cameras as well. That was a beautiful sighting, lying right next to the camera. We got some beautiful close-ups. But no, not many cats that I have seen live. But who knows? Maybe today is the day. I know those of you who watch regularly, um, outside of the broadcasting hours of this particular Live at the Waterhole show, have seen a variety. I know that there were some lions, I think, seen at Old Donyo recently, and also a cheetah at Old Donyo not that long ago. So we live in hope that a pride of 20 lions is going to emerge out of the bushes for a midday drink. So let's put our collective thoughts and positive mental attitude together, and who knows? Definitely a bit greener, but you would expect that in KZN, closer to the coast, a little bit more humid, generally a little bit moister, so, and with a nice dam like this as well, there'll be a relatively high water table, and you can see that reflected in the vegetation and how it is responding. If I look out of my window here in Hoedspruit, I'm struggling to even see a green leaf. Any leaves that I can see have generally browned off in colour. So the trees, again, most of them here, deciduous, they will lose those leaves. They cut off the supply of nutrients to the leaf to not waste their time and waste moisture and necessary resources during the winter. They will then fade and drop off. But we have those beautiful, beautiful colours this time of year, particularly if you go up into the Mapani Felt, where you have this just patchwork quilt of oranges and reds and greens on those Mapani trees. Very, very pretty time of the year, but most things now have pretty much browned off. I always feel bad for the animals. Quite how a lot of these grazing animals survive in times like this. It's a testament to their digestive system to be able to extract any nutrients out of the fairly lifeless grass that is left. But it's a yearly cycle, and they have adapted to do it. Leopard lover, you're saying you remember the beautiful times that we've all shared with the late great Tavungumi. Yeah, he was my favourite. He really was. I got very excited when I saw him. I seem to remember one of my stints at Juma. Unfortunately, we have to go back a couple of years for this one, but I think I was there for 2 weeks and I'd had somewhat of a leopard drought. Hadn't seen very many at all, and I think it was my last drive that after dark we managed to stumble across Tavungumi up in the northwest. So that was always very exciting for me. But yeah, he was my favourite cat. He was so pretty with his jaguar-like rosettes with little spots in the centre of them. He really was a magnificent creature, and we miss him dearly. Andrea, you're asking what other options do the elephants have to feed on? Well, they are pretty resourceful. They have, with their tusks and their feet and their trunks, they have various tools with which to extract food. So during the winter months, they will be feeding predominantly on whatever leaves that they can find, seed pods, even fallen leaves and things, which will still contain some of the carbohydrates which were locked into those leaves before they dropped off. But they will be subsidizing an awful lot of their diet now with cambium, which is that layer underneath the bark of branches that contains the phloem, so that sort of sugary water that the tree produces as a result of photosynthesis that is then transported around the plant to feed all the plant's extremities. And the way the elephants' teeth are and the way they eat, it's quite comical, really. Sometimes they'll take long branches and they sort of slowly use their trunk and feed it through their mouth from left to right, and you can watch it turning. It's like a grinding conveyor belt, and they just strip off that cambium layer, and then the branch comes out the other side, completely devoid of any bark. So they'll be getting a lot of nutrients that way, but this time of year as well, they'll also be sniffing out roots and tubers, things growing under the ground that they can uproot or dig up with their tusks, or use their heels to drag the soil out of the way, particularly things that have got a decent moisture content, things like, say, tubers. Leopard Lover, you're saying you've just returned from a trip to Margaret River. I'm afraid I don't know where Margaret River is, Leopard Lover, but you saw a male and a female blue fairy wren. And does South Africa have any blue birds? I don't know what a fairy wren looks like, Leopard Lover, so I'll take your word for it that they are blue, but they do have a pretty name. We have a fairy flycatcher here, but that's more sort of black and whitish. In terms of bright blue birds, well, we have the blue waxbills, we have the starlings, which display a variety of iridescent blues. Of course, we've got the rollers, the lilac-breasted roller with its, I would say, electric blue feathers on the wings that you see when it flies. What else do we have here? The blue crane, but that's more of a sort of a charcoaly grey colour as opposed to a vivid blue. I'm sure there are others, Leopard Lover. I'm just trying to rack my brains. You've put me on the spot now for obviously bluebirds. Let me have a think. Some of the bee eaters, of course, have a lot of blues. The swallow-tailed bee eater, the blue-cheeked bee eater. They've definitely got some blues. What else? I'm just flicking through the main family groups of birds to try and remind myself. We do have a blue-mantled flycatcher as well, which is more forest dwelling, but again, I wouldn't really call it vivid blue. Guinea fowl have a blue head, beginning to scrape the barrel a bit now. Kingfishers. What about kingfishers? A lot of blues on the kingfishers. Of course, blue isn't a pigment as such. It's a structural colour, so it is not a distinct pigment. That's why bluebirds never really lose that blue, whereas things that have more reds, they will fade over time because those are carotenoids which need to be topped up by whatever the animal or the bird is eating. Blue is more of a trick of the light, what we call Tyndall scattering. Rayleigh scattering, so the light from the sun is absorbed through the feathers, then reflected back off the base melanin layer, and is refracted through the air pockets in between the keratin structure, and then giving us the impression of blue. It's a little bit like why the sky looks blue. Air has no color, but the wow, I can't speak. The nitrogen molecules in the air scatter the sun's light, the shorter wavelengths, and then sort of spread it around the sky, giving it the impression of being blue. It's a little bit like we often say, but people say you can't see the stars during the daytime because the sun is out. That's not actually true. You can go up into space where the sun is very much out and you will see plenty of other stars. The reason you can't see the stars during the daytime is because of that scattering effect of the short wavelength blue light from our atmosphere. The official boundary of space is 100 kilometers above our heads, which is not far. If you think about how important that atmosphere, it's like the skin of an apple. Basically, think how far it is to travel 100 kilometers or about 60 miles. That's all it is that protects us from space. Yes, there is still stuff happening above the 100-kilometer mark, but that Kármán line is dictated on the fact that once you get above that line, you can see stars during the daytime. Hello, Wildlife Lady. I'm glad you were able to join us. No, you haven't missed very much at all, Wildlife Lady. Actually, it's been quite quiet. We've had some elephants at Zebra at Oldonyo, a couple of Egyptian geese at Jamala in Madikwe, and now we've been watching these elephants. So you got a
I met this remarkable rhino bull, whose name is Samson, last year in a place of extraordinary beauty, history and story. I'm going back there to see him in October, and I think you should come with me to his mysterious mountain fastness.
Safari, wine, and waterfalls. The ultimate African adventure. Sip South Africa's finest wines. Experience a world-class safari among Africa's iconic wildlife. And stand in front of Victoria Falls, one of the natural wonders of the world. All this can be yours with Wild Earth Travel, where Africa comes alive.
fascinating to see how patient they are when they hunt. I don't know if you're referring to the heron or to the crocodile, but both, I would suggest. We've got a couple there in the background I've just noticed as well. They blend in so well. That heron's eye looks more yellowish to me, and it certainly would make more sense for it to be a green-backed heron out this time of year. This time of the day, sorry. However, I'm not convinced it's quite necessarily stripy enough on the throat. Very difficult when you're relying just on camera pictures as opposed to being there in person, where you can get different angles and the light shines differently as the angles change and shows some of those more subtle colours and variations. What's our croc up to there? Ah, typical. We try and zoom in and he disappears. I didn't even see the red-billed teal there. Well, that maybe saved my blushes instead of floundering around trying to decide which heron that was. Crocodile. Do Tracy? You're asking, do crocodiles fight each other? They can and they will, males for territories and things. But to be honest, it doesn't happen very often. It's fairly energy intensive, and there seems to be a decent amount of mutual respect between them. I've never really seen two crocodiles going at it. But yes, it does happen. Right, let's have a good look at this heron. It's sort of a mixture between a red and a yellow eye, isn't it? This is not going to be easy. I'm relying obviously on my app at the moment. I may have to go and get a book to be sure. Yeah, I don't see a great deal of red and orange in that eye. Just trying to look for any subtle variations in the colorings and the markings. Must admit, there was part of me that hoped the heron had disappeared, so we didn't I didn't have to sit here trying to figure it out. You see now it looks a bit more orange in that light. It does look a little bit chunky and a little bit big for a greenback heron. That's why I keep considering the night heron. So it actually does say here under the black crown night heron, under confusing species, it says the adult is unmistakable, which I would agree with. The juvenile striated heron, which is the new name for the greenback heron, much smaller, less white spotting above. Not particularly helpful. Julian Thomas, you're saying definitely a night heron. Well, Julian Thomas, I may have to take your word for it, but we'll keep trying to figure it out. So I'm going to grab the book when there's a little pause in proceedings, so you can make absolutely sure. But as I said, it just looks a bit big and a bit chunky for a striated heron for me. These strong legs as well. Pacing very slowly, and if he's hunting something. Turn your head around, Mr. Heron. Look at the size of your eye. It does seem to have a very large eye, which suggests a more nocturnal nature, but quite why, if it is indeed a night heron, I do also, I think I agree with you, Julian Thomas. It's strange to see him out and about every day. So, Julian, you're saying bill too thick for greenbacked, very spotty on wing coverts, dark crown suggests it's a slightly older, immature. Isn't it great that we can have these debates? That's the beauty of birding. It's something that I've learnt to respect about birding. It's not very difficult to distinguish a zebra from a giraffe, for example. But once you get into the nitty-gritty of birds, there are so many different species to find, and they do sometimes pop up in places that you wouldn't expect them, or at times that you wouldn't expect them. So it's always a constant challenge. I'm very proud. So I can't remember if I told people when I was on last week, but I actually saw a black sparrowhawk here on the estate where I stay about a week or two ago. which I think is only the second one I've ever seen. It's not an uncommon bird. I've just been unlucky with my black sparrowhawk sightings, but that was a real treat. Okay, but it sounds like it's vulture feeding time up at Victoria Falls, so let's go and watch the mayhem. There is the mayhem. Maribel storks doing their best as well to try and get some scraps. So I think I say this every time, but it always reminds me of the emergence of the winged termites, the alates, when you look at them from afar. I love the way they just move. It is all so fluid. You get these little, say, little groups of them together, but it's rather mesmeric, isn't it? Which really absolutely no idea of what they're eating. You're just sort of looking at those areas where the scrums are forming, and somewhere in there, a poor carcass is being picked to pieces in seconds. Of course, remember that birds, the vultures are not sort of sitting there and swallowing and feeding everything. Generally speaking, they'll be filling their crops. Or just jumping on top of everybody else. Filling their crops, then they'll go and find a bit more of a quieter spot to digest in peace. Eat as much or get as much as possible into that crop from a competition perspective. Gillian, you're asking what different species we can find here. Well, marabou storks definitely, which you can see. Whiteback vultures, hooded vultures will be the most common. Occasionally, you could get white-headed or lappet-faced. I would have to double check that they do indeed occur here, but I believe they do. I'm not sure about Cape vulture, but the majority of these are going to be white-backed and hooded, with the obvious marabou storks wandering around as well. Ivan, that's an interesting question or a good question. Do I find animal behavior to be mostly predictable, or is it more spontaneous and random? Um, Ivan, I would say that animals are more easy to predict, in fact, far easier to predict than people. People are spontaneous and random. And there's a very well-known sort of idiom that gets thrown around of the only predictable thing about an animal is that it's unpredictable. And of course, they do things that we don't expect, but generally speaking, I think their behavior is relatively predictable. You have to account for the unexpected. But the way an animal is going to react is normally pretty similar, but there are, of course, exceptions, but often those exceptions are because of previous experience or interference or some sort of change in the behavior that has been brought about by us and the interactions with humans. Many of you may have seen only a couple of days ago the incident at Berchendal Camp in Kruger National Park, with some rather silly tourists taking video of a leopard snarling at them through the fence. I would normally expect a leopard to run away in that situation, but this one chose to be aggressive and to hold its ground. Um, Again, I wouldn't have expected that. They are more confident at night time, certainly, but most animals have an intrinsic fear of humans. But if that leopard's territory, obviously, well, I'm assuming encompasses the area around Bergendal, it probably patrols that fence line fairly regularly. It's an obvious pathway. Um, I have no doubt that there are bones and other things that have been, I don't want to say left out or tossed out by people. So it's probably got used to people and therefore reacts in a slightly different manner. But I consider that to be fairly unusual behavior. It would normally have run away. But say you never know with animals, and particularly the predators, those nocturnal predators, do get an awful lot more self-confident during the night time. That's when they know they have the upper hand.
My name is Amy, and today we're going to be doing things a little bit differently.
Even a hyena coming into the action as well now. Oh my word! She's stalking the hyena now. Leopard, hyena, lion, all together in one shot. Oh! Woo! This is action-packed.
Do you want to know why impala are the most common antelope we find here in the Kruger National Park? You can ask me questions like this in real time. Our safaris are live and interactive here in the heart of Africa. Join me on Safari Live. Connect with nature.
If you love watching Wild Earth, here's a little tip. Become a member. You can gain access to the channel ad-free, you can rewind and re-watch sightings, and you can join our Tuesday live safaris. There's also behind the scenes videos, fireside chats, and every Safari Live episode, whenever you want it. It's just a better way to stay connected to nature.
But back to that leopard incident, I'm going to be certainly watching the latest news on that. Obviously, the concern, and I'm sure a lot of you share the same concern, is that if it's not showing a natural fear of humans and it's hanging out by the camp, and if it's being seen regularly by the camp, it is going to be potentially deemed a danger. And the fear is, of course, that a decision will be made by the authorities to have to remove that leopard before something bad happens. But I have no doubt that that rather unusual behavior is because of humans in the first place. So it's not the first time it's happened, and it won't be the last, unfortunately. But another good indication that viewing and experiencing these animals is one thing, but we must remember that there are boundaries that shouldn't be crossed, and we want to view natural behavior and see animals doing what they would be doing if we weren't there, not see adjusted behavior. Good afternoon, Cat Fan, as well. It's a nice surprise to hear me on live at the Waterhole. Well, I normally do a few. I wasn't supposed to be doing today originally. One of my colleagues was in, but they had an emergency and asked if anyone could stand in. So, being the dutiful person I am, I put my hand up and said, I will happily cover today. Good excuse to watch some amazing cameras and speak to you wonderful people. I'll be doing a few more throughout the course of the month. Fuzzy Dunlop, you're saying that this reminds you of your office when someone brings cakes in. I can imagine that is the case, yeah. And Dark Main Lover, you're loving to see the birds having a feast. Absolutely. Happy birds. You're also asking what they would substitute their food or their diet for if they can't find any carrion. Well, there are incidents of vultures hunting for themselves. Again, it's one of those things they are capable of doing it, but it's a bit like hyenas. Hyenas are very capable of hunting and do hunt quite regularly, but it's easier to take food off something else, saving energy and making life a little bit safer for oneself. Um, the good news is for vultures that things have finite lifetimes. Everything dies, so everything living at some point will die. Their lifespans may be different based on their size and their metabolisms and their situation and environmental conditions, but there will always be something to find. But so there have been records of them killing sort of young springbok, young warthogs, stealing food off other birds, stealing food off marabou stalks as well. But they will scavenge. But pretty much it's carrion. And also don't forget they can travel massive distances, riding those thermals, gliding between thermals. They can travel tens, if not hundreds of kilometers searching for food if they need to. To get any leftover nutrients if there really is nothing else for them. There have been records of them harassing jackals and chasing jackals off their food and stealing those. And then, of course, scavenging around landfills and dumps for uh, human caused waste as well. Feeding time is over. going to go about their days, the rest of their day. I'm sure they'll all be back again this time tomorrow. Okay, well, always fun to spend time with the vultures having a feast. I think if I heard correctly, we're going to go up to Kenya to Lentor now and see what's happening there. Beautiful, some fire finches and look like I think a canary. Everything disappeared just as we arrived, but we have some lovely birding views here at Lentor. Never sure if it's Lentor or Lentore. But one of my favourites, firefinches and waxbills and petilias. I love these little seed eaters. You get such vivid colours on them. These look more like female weavers or weavers that are coming down for a bath. I'm not going to flail around trying to work out which species, because my knowledge of specific Kenyan weaver species is not brilliant. I guess they look like southern masked weavers that we have down here. But whether or not they are, or if it's a slightly different, similar looking species in Kenya, I'm not 100% sure. It's a frantic bathing. Oh, and a sparrow.
Join me, Andrew Wistenholm, for an indescribable 6-night stay in the beautiful Albany of the Eastern Cape at Amakhala Game Reserve. Now, this trip is going to be action-packed with a lot of storytelling, adventure, as well as the opportunity to make everlasting memories. We'll be exploring the best of Amakhala by staying at 2 luxury lodges, which will be the perfect blend of comfort as well as wilderness. Book your spot today and let's get ready to explore the wild beauty of Amakhala.
At Wild Earth, we believe every story has the power to create change. That's why we've launched the Wild Earth Impact Foundation, a non-profit dedicated to conservation and social impact. By showcasing conservation stories, we can change lives, protect nature, and empower communities. We have partnered with Empowers Africa to accept tax-deductible donations from US donors. Your donation will help fund critical programs that support our mission. Join us and be part of the change.
Would you like to know at what age a buffalo calf gets its horns? These are questions that you can ask me in real time. Our safaris are live and interactive here in the heart of Africa. Join me on Safari Live and connect with nature.
Welcome to Safari Spotlight. We'll be
And you pretend like you're a serviceman, eh?
Got no idea what's going on this reserve.
Expecting the unexpected.
Are we stuck down there?
What am I trying to do?
Because we have another giant of Mabula. That was incredible.
This is unbelievable.
It's going to be a spectacular afternoon.
They were Swahili sparrows, but sure, there's very little difference between them. So I imagine it's more regional variations. Olivia, you're asking, are male birds always more colourful than the females? As a very generalised rule, Olivia, I would say yes, but not. You can't say always because there are differences. You get some birds that have what we call no sexual dimorphism, i.e., there is no difference between the males and the females of the species, and about 1% of birds worldwide are what we call polygynous species, sorry, polyandrous species, which means one female will have multiple male mates throughout the course of the season. Generally, those are the ones where the males actually do the incubating and the rearing of the young with no help from the female. She's off just to try and fertilize more eggs with different males. So things like the African jacanas, the button quails, they're very, very small percentage, but in those ones, the female is normally larger and more brightly coloured because they are attracting a male as opposed to the male attracting the female. But as a general rule, yes, the males are normally more colourful than the females, but also can depend on the season as well. A lot of birds have what we call an eclipse plumage, where during the winter months when they're not breeding, they look very, very similar to the females. And then when summer comes, they molt and grow far more colourful feathers. Again, it's like putting on your best clothing, putting on your tuxedo, your glad rags for a night out to attract females at the right time of year. Okay, a nice little spot of birding at Lentor. Let's go back down to Tenby. Slightly more elephants than we had before. Some bigger ones, some smaller ones. The young, slightly more younger, a teenager having a drink. Looks quite young to have left the security of the breeding herd, but at this sort of age, they do start spending more and more time away from the herd. May return periodically, just sort of checking in, gaining experience as to what it is going to be an adult elephant, and far more independent and more solitary than the traditional matriarchal herd structure. Often you'll find if they're moving with the herd, these young teenagers, they're normally the young bulls, you're going to find them at the back of the herd. They're just separating themselves a little bit from mum. They want to be seen walking with mum, learning their independence, exploring their surroundings a little bit more. There's actually a lovely, and I told this story last night while I was doing one of my night sky safaris. I have another one this evening, busy season for me at the moment, but there's a lovely tale that actually comes from the Swana culture up in Botswana, about the very well-known Scorpio or Scorpius constellation. It has the red supergiant star Antares, known as the heart of the scorpion, and then the rest of the body, you can follow the line of stars around the curl of what would be perceived as its tail and the stinger at the end. And one of the Swana interpretations of that is that Antares is the matriarch of a herd of elephants, and the rest of the scorpion's body and tail is the rest of the herd, sort of spread out like a caravan, and she is leading them to something. We don't know what, but though I like to think of it as the three stars that represent the pincers and the head of the scorpion are three baobab trees that the matriarch is leading them towards. But the star right at the end, one of the ones in the stinger called Shaula, the two close together, that was perceived to be the next most dominant female, and she was rounding up probably a young bull who was wandering off, and her job was to keep that bull with the rest of the herd so that the caravan can safely get to whatever it is that they were getting to. So in my brain, it's the three baobab trees. But I was quite happy to find that because I was very surprised to see there are very few links to elephants in African star law, which surprises me considering the majesty and how obvious these animals are. There are some suggestions that the Great Square of Pegasus was seen by some cultures as an elephant as well. But otherwise, very, very few links to elephants. There's giraffes up in the sky, there's elands, there's steenbok, there are various lions, um, but no very well-known elephants. Hartebeest as well. Some of the red stars were seen as red hartebeests. And one of my personal favourites, there's a little constellation very close to Pegasus, actually. So you'd have to be here in South Africa, you'll have to be up at about midnight to see it because it doesn't rise till quite late. But one of my favourite little constellations called Delphinus the dolphin. Apparently, it was seen in some African cultures as a mapani worm, which is one of those edible caterpillars, a very important resource for local tribes that particularly love the mapani trees and are collected and eaten either raw or dried out and sort of crushed into porridge to get extra protein from them. I did try them once. I'm quite happy to not try one again. To be honest, it wasn't the tastiest thing I've ever eaten. But I suppose if you have nothing else, then it's an option. Not sure what bothers this bull here, but interesting to see. I was asked about predictable animal behavior earlier. You saw that elephant before he gave that little head flap to whomever that was aimed at, was holding his front foot up and just dangling it there. Obviously, the other one doing it. But often, if I'm in a situation with elephants and I see that, that to me is an elephant contemplating things. So just watch him carefully to see what his next move may be. It's not a sign of aggression, but to me, I interpret that dangling foot as an elephant deciding what to do next. Is he going to become more aggressive? Is he going to wander off? But processing something. But that is the nice thing about animals. They do generally, unless you're talking about something like the buffalo, which really doesn't like to share much in terms of emotion. They're a bit like sharks, really. They don't give very much away. Most animals, you can get a good idea of the mood that it's in just by watching its behavior, watching the way it carries itself, some of the body language, some of the posturing, be it the ears, the tail, the hair, the stride. There are many things that you can interpret, and the longer you spend with these animals and sort of let your brain figure it out, the in inverted commas, the easier it becomes. But so we can never make assumptions, but I still maintain that animals are more predictable than people.
What does it take to handle the wild? Balance. Determination. Focus.
Yaku!
And gear that can take a beating so you don't have to.
Would you like to know the difference between a male and a female wildebeest? You can ask me questions like this in real time. Our safaris are live and interactive here in the heart of Africa. Join me on Safari Live and connect with nature.
It is indeed a three-banded plover. Very rare that you come across a waterhole in southern Africa without at least one or two of these present. Oh, leopard lover, that's a in-depth question. Then do I know what South African birds have the longest or the shortest lifespans? I will check and see if I can find a more finite answer for you, but off the top of my head, generally speaking, the bigger the bird, the older the bird can get, although I'm not including necessarily ostriches in that. Things like ground hornbills and eagles can certainly get somewhere between 40 and 50 years old. I don't know of anything else that will get older than that, but I'll have a look. And in terms of shortest, I would assume small bird, something like a penduline tit maybe, probably has a relatively short lifespan. There is some sort of correlation between metabolism and the rate at which a heart beats versus how long that organism will then live. So generally things that have slow beating hearts will live longer than things that have fast beating hearts, almost suggesting that every heart has a sort of a finite number of beats that it can do before it runs out of energy or petrol or whatever you want to call it. But it's a good question, though, Leopard Lover. I've never really thought about the shortest lifespan. See what I can find for you. If anyone's got any suggestions for me to double check, please feel free to send them in. And I suppose a lot will also have to do with environmental factors, availability of food, inclement weather conditions, droughts, not being able to find enough food, human interference. There's going to be many variables. Okay, a very quick search suggests that in sort of 40 years and up, ground hornbills can live up to 60 years in captivity, but on average between 40 and 50. Wandering albatrosses, potentially up to 50 to 60 years. Vultures 30 to 40 years. Some of the large storks like the saddle-billed and the marabou between 25 and 40. And in terms of shortest lived birds, let's see, some of the waxbills and things in those families, typically 2 to 4 years, white eyes 2 to 5 years, sunbirds 3 to 5 years, weavers 2 to 6 years. So yeah, I didn't consider the wandering albatross, not a very common bird to find in the Lowveld, that's for sure, but they are occasionally seen off the coasts of southern Africa. But if anybody knows of any others, say, feel free to send them in. Catherine, you're asking if there are any books with those stories about the stars. Catherine, it is, I can say it's the bane of my life trying to find cultural African star lore. Unfortunately, so much of it was oral tradition, and has simply just stopped being passed down because people don't talk to each other the way we used to. We stare at our phones and we don't sit around a campfire and swap stories the way that we used to. That's why those types of trips, those types of safaris are becoming so popular now. People trying to reconnect to nature the ways they did. There are a couple of books you can look out for there. There's one called Flowers in the Sky that has some African star lore. Otherwise, there's a few websites that you can have a look at. The ASSA, which is the Astronomical Society of Southern Africa, they've got a little section on African mythology and star lore, but it's very, very difficult to find. A lot of the stories that I tell have been found by talking to local people and trying to save those stories that were passed on to them before they are lost, because it happens in a generation or two, or a generation. If the story's not passed on, it's dead forever. So it is a big problem. It's a vacuum of information. I actually would love to do a book collating all of the star lore and cultural mythology, not just from Africa, but from Egypt, from Mari, from Greek, Roman, Mayan. I actually proposed it to a publishing house a little while ago, and they said unfortunately it wouldn't be something they were interested in, not so much just for the topic, but people don't read books anymore, and it may not be the most lucrative or viable topic for them to publish, which I unfortunately understand because that's the way the world is at the moment. If I win the lottery, I might do an app. But I think that's probably the easiest option in today's day and age. But I know nothing of programming to be able to do it myself, and I know it's not cheap to do a proper app. Ivan, you're asking if animals rely on stars or other celestial objects for migration and nightly movements. Absolutely, they do. They will use other stimuli as well. It's not just the stars, but experiments have been done to show that birds can see the rotation of the sky, so they can't see, or we don't think they recognize individual stars. They don't have the processing brain power to recognize a specific star, but they can see the rotation of the sky, so they can see north and celestial south, basically, the point in the sky that doesn't move, that everything rotates around, so anti-clockwise for us in the southern hemisphere, around celestial south, and clockwise around Polaris, the North Star in the northern hemisphere. They did experiments with birds in a planetarium and recorded their direction of travel at migration time. A lot of marine mammals, or some marine mammals, some seals have been proven to be able to identify individual bright stars to assist with navigation, certainly. We think the same is probably true of whales, but the seals were tested in an aquarium in a planetarium. Bit more difficult to put a whale inside a planetarium or build a big enough planetarium to actually see a whale making significant directional changes based on changing the orientation of the stars above its head. Lots and lots of insects, of course. We use the moon. That's why they're attracted to your outside lights. They spiral around the moon or your outside light with their back always pointed towards it, because that's how they sort of control the attitude of their flight. They'll always try and keep the bright thing above them, so they know they're flying horizontal to the ground, so they tend to wheel around lights in circles, thinking they're going flat, but they're not. They're going round and around in circles. Dung beetles, we know, use the Milky Way. They can't see the Milky Way itself, but they can pick up the light gradient change between the darker parts of the sky and the lighter stripe of the Milky Way. So if it's a moonless night, we know that dung beetles can do so. They've done experiments again with that, putting dung beetles under sort of mini planetariums and recording how they orientate themselves. And if you put little caps on dung beetles, which people have done, so they can't see the sun during the day or the moon or the Milky Way at night time, they get very, very confused. So lots and lots of examples, and probably lots more that we don't know about either. But it certainly makes sense that they would use the stars. Why would you not? Assuming you're acting at night time, of course. Julian Thomas, you're saying the oldest known bird in the world is Wisdom, a Laysan albatross that still nests on Midway in Hawaii, and she's 74 years old. Well, good for you, Wisdom. That is a healthy age indeed for a bird, but interesting, another albatross as well. But that would make sense. Big bird, slower metabolism, longer life. All right, sounds like we're going to head back up to Kenya and Lentor. Let's see what's going on up that side now. Oh, it's a little ground squirrel. These are some of my favorites. Somewhere I've got a beautiful picture of a ground squirrel I took on Madikwe, sort of feeding on a flower. Kind of looks like he's holding the flower and sniffing the petals. But how beautiful and delicate is that? A ground squirrel having a drink. Massive eyes. I'm sure that it helps, or it makes the eyes look bigger by having that white surround as well. Probably a lot of reasons for that. Very important for communication and body language between individuals, also from an anti-predation point as well. It's very obvious to a predator, and therefore, if a predator knows it's been seen, it's less likely to carry out an attack. So by accentuating the size of your eye with that white coloration, better chance that maybe a predator thinks that it's been spotted, but still a very, very large eye if you consider the size of the skull. But little thing like this needs to be very, very vigilant of approaching danger. And those eyes do sort of bulge out from the sides of the heads as well to give an even wider field of view, so they can see quite far behind their heads as well. Very important. It's interesting when the other one appeared, that one's tail feathers just sort of expanded and contracted, almost as if he was ready to bolt if needs be. But that one came from behind, so it shows that he could certainly see movement coming from behind him. Obviously not directly behind the neck, but those blind spots for us, not a blind spot for a squirrel.
My name is Amy, and today we're going to be doing things a little bit differently.
The Wild Earth Impact Foundation is a non-profit that uses the power of wildlife storytelling as a force for good. We create sustainable development projects that showcase conservation stories, empower people, and inspire environmental action. As a registered South African PBO, you can make a tax-deductible donation to the Wild Earth Impact Foundation. To find out more, visit our website.
This is what they call a shambe, a family, a whole herd of elephants.
But nature is beyond amazing. Nature is just everything.
We'd love to hear from you. Questions, comments about biology, Africa, safari. She's using her tail like a monkey.
How cool is this?
Any evolution of animals is going to be in response to our activities over a shorter period of time. But no, Bushbabe, I wouldn't even know where to start thinking about that. What would happen to zebras, I wonder? I think you have to have a very good imagination to think that far ahead. But 10,000 years in terms of the history of the Earth is a blink of an eye. I don't think a great deal of evolution would occur in that, but what would it be like 1,000,000 years in the future? I don't know. But yeah, sorry if I'm going quiet. You're making me think about it, Bushbo, now if I can think of any obvious things. But everything I come up with has to do with things adapting to human influence. Unless, of course, we have things like ice ages again, or there's other celestial problems, massive solar storms. What's going to happen when the sun starts to swell up as a red giant and temperatures increase massively? Um, well, I mean, ultimately, there's nothing we can do about that. The sun will swallow the Earth at some point, but we've got 4 or 5 billion years before we have to worry too much about that. But interesting question, Bush Babe. That's going to keep me occupied for days, I would think. Timus, you're asking, do these oryx look different from, well, you've said the ones at Mabulla, but in, let's just call it southern Africa. They do look a little bit different. They're slightly smaller and lighter than the southern African oryx, so we're going to call them the Gemsbok to give them their more traditional local name. Uh, so you're looking at maybe 50 kilograms extra in the southern African one, which is probably to do with living in drier, hotter conditions. Larger surface area means a smaller ratio, a bigger ratio between surface area and volume. So it actually helps with regulating heat and not getting too hot. You get a lot more white on the southern African Gemsbok as well. Again, generally found in drier areas, so all designed to try and regulate heat and reflect a lot of the heat, particularly on the underside of our oryxes down here, a lot whiter. I would say they've got bolder face patterning, whether that's if there's a reason for that, again, I can only assume it's going to be to do with environmental and temperature differences. I can't think of any other obvious changes. But they certainly look pretty similar. The most obvious difference between the zebra species, both considered to be plains zebra, the ones we have here, and these ones, is these ones with the absence of the shadow stripe, that brownish marking that usually transect or intersects the white stripe of the zebra. The East African zebras don't have those. Normally, I assume it's because of, again, regional differences. We have a bit more heavier vegetation here versus up there, so perhaps the extra brown just helps to blend in. I would say these have got stripier legs as well, more distinct, more tightly packed stripes on the legs than our zebras do here. But definitely a fan of those Gemsbok. I think ours are slightly prettier, if I'm allowed to say so, just with the more contrasting colours, but they remain one of my favourite antelopes. I think they're just so striking, particularly those facial markings. And Darkmane Lover, you agreeing with me that the South African Gemsbok is your favourite antelope? Yeah, I agree. It's that here, and a male kudu is spectacular. I always maintain that the impala is one of the prettiest antelope species on the planet, but generally doesn't get the credit it deserves because it is so common. But as I always say, they're common for a reason. They're exceptionally good at what they do. There's a reason that there are so many of them. They are very well adapted for the conditions in which they live, and they proliferate very, very successfully. Could you, little ones, still got brownish colours on the legs? This one's got very beautiful markings, a lot of black on this zebra, particularly around the neck, very regal. See, back to your question, Bushbabe, I bet if you ask people a few 100,000 years ago what they thought equines, would they ever evolve into stripy zebras, I doubt anyone would have come up with that. I'm not sure at what point the first evolutionary history of zebra stripes is within their family. It might be quite an interesting rabbit hole to disappear down. Oh, big yawn. I just love those markings, those sort of diamond-shaped markings down the forehead as well. Very, very pretty. I didn't think to look at the time, but that one standing that I commented had the very dark, well, the predominantly black stripes, I would say is likely a male normally, although not always. I find that males are more contrasted than females. Again, whether that's just a thing to make them stand out a little bit more, look a little bit more obvious and proud, perhaps. This Ilan cow has decided there's a few too many zebras around, but interesting to see her on her own. Not sure where the rest of her herd would be. Martina, you're saying how pretty they are and that you love these zebras. Again, they're one of those things because they're not uncommon. Although in certain areas, certainly when I was in Sabi Sabi in those areas, if we found zebras on the reserve, they were called in because it's something that everybody wants to see, and I think most people assume that it's almost a guarantee of seeing. But in areas that are more wooded and don't have open grasslands, which is what zebras require, they're entirely grazing animals, although I have seen them occasionally browse leaves, yeah, and occasionally also sort of scrape off bark to get to that cambium layer under times of extreme stress. Strangely, they seem to enjoy doing that on the variable bush willows. I've noticed that I've seen them do that a few times on the bush willow species. Why that one specifically, I couldn't tell you. But they are really spectacular animals. I was actually just enjoying them all drinking there and noting the similarities but the distinct differences between those stripe patterns. They all sort of follow the same curvature of the muscles and the contours of the body, but are very much unique to each other in terms of the thickness and in terms of how long the specific stripes are. Where are your friends, Mrs. Ilan? You're normally in a herd. Where are they? Did you get separated? Nina Brown, you're asking what the dangers would be of having more than one species of zebra in a park. Would an interbred zebra have health issues or look vastly different? Well, you do sometimes get two species of zebras in the same area. Cape Mountain zebra and the more traditional plains zebra do occur in areas together. I'm unaware of any hybridization between them, but I don't see why it wouldn't be possible. In terms of health issues, generally speaking, hybrids don't do so well. It's just that the genetics don't mesh very well and they're potentially more susceptible to disease or don't live quite so long. It's almost nature's way of dealing with that problem if it does arise, just so things will not change too much. Certainly, I would see no problem if you translocated some of these zebras to southern Africa, so they are considered to be the same species. They didn't used to be. This used to be plain zebra, and we used to have the Birchall zebra down here, but things changed. What was it about 10 or 15 years ago due to genetic testing, where we discovered that they were genetically, I don't want to use the word identical, but very similar enough to be categorized as one species, and it was just regional variations of pigmentation and amounts of melanin that accounted for the slight differences. I see no reason why an East African zebra couldn't, or East African plains zebra couldn't successfully mate with a Southern African plains zebra.
Katika mwanga wa mwezi kivuli hutembea, mrembo mweusi anayepotea, macho yake ni taa, gizani huwaka, fuvu la msitu, malkia anayejificha. Zatemba utatama na mina.
Are you ready for the adventure of a lifetime? Wild Earth Travel's newsletter is your passport to a magical journey. Explore exclusive travel options featuring special offers at stunning Wild Earth locations and all hosted by your favorite presenters. Don't miss out. Head over to our website and subscribe to the Wild Earth Travel newsletter today and stay in the know on all our unforgettable adventures. Wild Earth Travel, where Africa comes alive.
A shepherd's tree were two giraffe about 3 or 4 meters away from the bedroom window. They obviously moved very, very slowly, not to upset anybody, and they hung around for about 10 or 15 minutes. It was amazing, just sitting on the bed, watching a giraffe through the window from almost point blank range. Made me feel very, very grateful for where I'm fortunate enough to stay, to have encounters such as that. We've got a few baby giraffes wandering around at the moment, which is always rather cute to see. Very few elephants today at Old Donyo. I don't think I've ever gone so long at Old Donyo Waterhole without having an elephant approach and have a drink. It's the zebra happy hour. The next wave coming in. Raj, you're asking, do zebras fall prey to lions or do they prefer bucks and wildebeest and things? Well, I say lions don't get out of bed in the morning or no, in the evening for them, and they don't decide, oh, today I think I'm going to have zebra for dinner. They'll take whatever they can get, but as a rule, lions, the majority of a lion's diet, or the most common things they take are zebra and wildebeest, depending, of course, on the population levels, depending on where those lions are living or where they are to be found. But zebra and wildebeest, that sort of size of prey is the most common. There is a bit of a misconception that lions avoid waterbuck because of the unpleasant smell, because of the gland on the skin. Not the case. Lions will quite happily take waterbuck, they'll take kudu, but a lot of it's going to be dependent upon the habitat and what prey availability there is in that particular area. So zebra and wildebeest, I think, make up the bulk in a traditional sense, statistically, but they will quite happily take whatever they can get. But again, it's a sort of a niche, ecological niche again. Yes, leopards can take young zebra, but a full-grown wildebeest, a full-grown zebra, it's a tough proposition even for an adult male leopard. So really, from a prey size perspective, it is more likely that the lions are going to take the zebra and the wildebeest because it's also a risk reward. If you're a lion, you're in a pride, preferable to take larger prey items to get more food to feed everybody's mouths. Oh, Juliet, you asked me what kind of butterflies are likely to be here. I wouldn't even know where to start, Juliet. Butterflies, particularly, are very, very difficult. There are many families of butterflies to which, let's see, I feel you need a magnifying glass to be able to tell the difference between them. There are so many different species that look so similar to each other. And they also have very, very, very specific habitat requirements. There are many species of butterfly that are only found in a tiny area. We're talking just, a few square kilometers is the only place on Earth that they exist. They're very susceptible to environmental changes. And so there are many critically endangered species of butterfly. So I wouldn't even like to say, Juliet, I'm afraid. Obviously, we had a bit of a freeze on the camera there at Old Donyo, so we've jetted back across to Tempe Elephant Park and back in Maputo land. See what our elephant bulls are up to. But the more striking butterflies, I mean, those are not too difficult to identify. We get in this area a lot of citrus swallowtails, the green swordtails we see quite regularly. Some of the charaxes, like the white-barred charaxes, those are very, very beautiful. We get various orange tips and purple tips. There are the whites, there are the monarchs, there are the browns. The coppers are a group of butterflies that I've always struggled with. There are pages and pages of them if you have a butterfly book, but they are so, so similar in terms of their markings that unfortunately, short of finding a dead one and comparing it in exquisite detail with the pictures, it's very, very difficult to know unless you are truly an expert in the blues. Oh, there are so many different species of blues, and they're so small that if they go flitting past, it's impossible to be species specific. Bush Babe, you're asking, is it in the best interest of cats to develop a niche when they hunt, or does it limit them? Well, I suppose it will limit them, but it also removes competition. And it is going to differ depending on the habitat, depending on what prey species is available in an area. But it makes sense to avoid competition with other predators if you can. Does it limit potentially what you are going to eat? Yes, but as I said, just because they statistically will take prey around that sort of wildebeest to zebra size in the case of lions, they're quite happy to take out an impala or a deka or whatever they find. So I think it's a bit difficult to say, does it benefit them or does it limit them? It's just the way it is. It's the way it's evolved to be. What you can't have is everything doing the same thing. Otherwise, then there won't be enough of that thing for everybody to go around. It might be fine for a bit, but overutilization, as we as humans should know very well by now, is if you keep doing the same thing, you'll run out. So it makes sense, I think, to have more of a niche. It removes competition. Elephant at the back, scratching the parts that other elephants cannot reach. Oh, he's gone for the back of the ear now. I wonder how many elephants have scratched up against that specific tree. Always see elephants having a good scratch over there. Juliet, thank you for your forgiveness. You're saying you're having trouble identifying the 4 different types of butterflies in your garden in the UK. So you feel my pain. Yeah, I've got a butterfly book here. It's about 400 pages, 500 pages, with about at least 10, probably, well, 12 to 16 butterflies per page. There are lots over here. I have no knowledge of UK butterflies at all, unfortunately. But I do like identifying things. So I'm sure if I was to go and spend a significant amount of time back in England again, it's probably something I would get into. I do keep a UK bird list when I visit home now. It's one thing I've always said. I feel very honoured to be able to live out here and look out of my window or drive around Kruger or go to different areas of the country and recognise the majority of the vegetation, the majority of the birds, a lot of the insect life we have here. Because for 20 years, I've spent a huge amount of time on a daily basis around them. But when I go back to England and I don't know very many of the trees, I struggle with the birds. I have no concept of the bird calls, although I'm trying to learn them, but I go back so infrequently that I generally forget them. By the time I go back again, I almost feel a bit out of place, a little uncomfortable, not being able to interpret my surroundings or understand or connect to my surroundings the way I feel I can do over here.
Now this leopard that we're looking at is known by the name of Hlalamba.
full name is Cedric Leslie Dold. I grew up mostly in the Lowveld. I grew up here pretty much on the southern side of Kruger National Park, a place called Marloth Park, for most of my years. Something surprising about myself, I did play drums in a band for many years. Best sighting I presented, we found Palumba and the two cubs, and the cubs are just way big.
Hyenas love bathing.
Clean and healthy because they absorb toxins. With insects, I mean, a lot of it's going to have to do with their predators. Butterflies rely on caterpillars being able to cocoon, so caterpillars need to have the right foods, and so very species specific quite often in terms of the food that they need. So I wouldn't necessarily say that the area is unhealthy, but I wouldn't be surprised if your area was fairly homogeneous, i.e., you didn't have a great deal of variety in your vegetation or your landscape or your geology, because the less variety there is, the less diversity of species that you are going to have. But certainly, if there was lots and then there all of a sudden wasn't, then I would suggest yes. Insecticides obviously being a massive cause of that. Fertilizers and its commercial insecticides being sprayed because of agriculture will have a huge knock-on effect to insects, which can have a knock-on effect to their ability to pollinate flowering plants. So it is all interconnected. I don't care if we're talking about an elephant or a single-celled amoeba. They're all integral parts of an ecosystem. They all work together, and the integrity of that ecosystem is built upon the foundations of great species diversity. I always describe it as scaffolding. You've got lots and lots of scaffolding, things are stable. You can afford to lose one or two things. If you've just got 4 posts and you lose one of those posts, chances are things are going to topple over. Right, let's head over to Founders down in the Eastern Cape. Let's change of scene down here at Founders. Sounds like we might have some baboons somewhere. Noisy lapwing. Jane Ludlow asking which animal species walk like the hyenas. There's a baboon. Both feet on both legs on the same side moving together. Well, giraffe would be the most obvious. Camels do it as well. That's the only 2 I can think of off the top of my head, if I'm honest, but there may be a couple of others. I'm guessing an aardwolf. I saw aardwolf at the Buller recently. I didn't actually think to check its stride pattern, but being a member of the hyena family, I'm assuming that they have the same stride pattern. What have you got there, Mr. Baboon? A melon or something. Probably stole it from the lodge. I don't know of what fruit or what tree of fruit that size would have come from. They do monkey oranges, but that looks a bit too big for a monkey orange. The aptly named monkey orange, if it is. Whatever it is, looks rather tasty though. having a picnic by the water's edge. I don't think you get Sama melons down in the Eastern Cape. The Western Cape you do, which are eaten by various antelope species as well as monkeys, particularly during the winter to get water sources. They would be about that size, but they're generally more sort of greenish in colour and have more of a sort of a polka dotty patterning to them. It looks like a melon to me, so I wonder if it wasn't stolen from the lodge. Certainly quite a fleshy pulp. Have you got any other ideas what fruit that would be? That you again, Eastern Cape is not an area that I know very well, but I can't think of anything that would produce that sort of sized fruit that a baboon would have found. Obviously not happy of sharing it either. Messy eater. Wow, we're down to only 2 minutes left. Doesn't time fly when you're having fun? Joanne Muller, thanking myself, and everybody at Wild Earth. I have Tadiwa for the last hour or so assisting, all the Zoomies, and of course, all of you fabulous people sending through your questions and comments. Sarah UK, you're also very, very welcome. The last 2 hours have gone by in a flash. Wow, look at all that moisture coming out of whatever that fruit is. Yeah, so I was just thinking it's surprising that nothing else was trying to take that fruit. But I'd also be looking after a prize like that. But we are down to the last minute, everybody. So thanks. It's been a great show. We've seen some interesting things, loads of zebras today, which was lovely, and some very interesting topics that were brought up. Thank you for the star questions. I thought many of you know that I enjoy those. And Bushbabe, your question about how animals might evolve in the future is going to keep me occupied for a while as well. So thank you. But whatever your plans are for the rest of the Thursday, I wish you well. Do keep watching our cameras. Don't forget to join the Sunset Safari, which will kick off in a couple of hours' time. Otherwise, yeah, enjoy your day. Wish me clear skies for this evening, which looks questionable according to the forecast, but we'll see. But have a great day, everybody. Thank you very, very much.
Welcome to Safari Spotlight. We're heading out on a journey of natural discovery through some of South Africa's most beautiful and wilderness areas. The Greater Kruger, the Albany district of the Eastern Cape, and the mystical Waterberg. Each location has its own unique sense of place. Each offers something different and all give a sense of peace and wonder. If you like what you see on Safari Spotlight, you can visit these special wild places by visiting Wild Earth Travel. We'll create your dream safari.
Gert and I have made our way down to Southgate here at Welgevonden, and we're going to be doing something a little bit different. We're going to be heading out with the conservation management team to do a bit of intervention. And what that's going to entail is hopefully the guides are able to find Tembe, the big dominant male lion here at Welgevonden. Now we need to change up the genetics with the predators and of course lots of other animals. So a reserve not too far away from here has